Let us read Proverbs 19, verse 21. Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. A young architect spent months designing what he believed would be his career-defining project. Every detail had been carefully drawn, calculated, and refined. The building would stand as proof of his skill and vision. But just before construction began, the city council rejected the proposal. New safety regulations and environmental concerns made the design unviable. At first, he was crushed. All his effort seemed wasted. Yet, in the months that followed, he was assigned to work on a community housing project he had never considered important. That project reshaped his career and, more importantly, his heart. He later said, "My best plans built structures. God's plan built my purpose." That story echoes the wisdom of Proverbs 19:21. This verse captures a central biblical theme. Human intentions are limited, but God's will ultimately stands. It does not discourage planning. Rather, it teaches us to recognize our limits, even while we plan. Planning reflects wisdom and responsibility. We set goals about career, family, finances, ministry, and the future. Scripture itself commends thoughtful preparation. The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance. Proverbs 21, verse 5. Yet, alongside planning, we are called to humility, to trust God in prayer and surrender outcomes to His sovereign purpose. We plan based on incomplete human knowledge. We make decisions influenced by circumstances, personal desires, and biases. Yet all these are vulnerable to change. Thus, even the most careful plans can fail because we cannot foresee everything. A person may chart a career path only to encounter unexpected opportunities, health challenges, economic shifts, or new passions that redirect life entirely. Frustration and disappointment often follow. Yet, Scripture invites us to see such moments differently. What appears to be disruption is actually divine redirection. God guides His children toward endpoints they could never have envisioned. The contrast in Proverbs 19:21 is not between good planning and bad planning. It is between limited human perspective and God's enduring purpose. God sees the full picture, past, present, and future. His purposes are neither temporary nor reactive. Nothing catches Him by surprise, and nothing can ultimately thwart what He intends. Isaiah records the Lord's declaration, "My purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please." Isaiah 46, verse 10. Job, after his long season of suffering and confusion, acknowledged, "No purpose of yours can be thwarted." Job 42, verse 2. Paul assures believers that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. Romans 8:28. These scriptures remind us that while our understanding is partial, God's purpose is steady and complete. Throughout the Bible, we see lives redirected in ways that seemed disruptive but ultimately fulfilled God's greater plan. Abraham lived a settled and comfortable life in Ur when God called him to leave everything and journey to an unknown land. He was given no map, no description of the land, and no guarantees beyond God's promise. Yet he obeyed, a remarkable willingness that made him the father of a nation and a center figure in God's redemptive story. Moses, after fleeing Pharaoh's wrath, settled into a quiet life of a shepherd in the wilderness. He might have expected to live out his days in obscurity, but at the burning bush, God called him to return to Egypt, the very place he had fled, and confront Pharaoh. It was a daunting assignment, but Moses set aside his fears and plans to follow God's direction. The result was liberation for an entire people, the giving of the law, and the formation of a nation. King David desired to build a permanent temple for the Lord, a noble and heartfelt ambition. Yet, God told him that he would not build it. That task would belong to his son Solomon. David humbly and readily accepted God's will, and therefore he prepared materials and established a stable kingdom, making ready a place and the resources for the temple's construction. His role was not diminished by the change of plan. It was fulfilled through obedience. Joseph's life offers another striking example. His youthful dreams did not include betrayal, slavery, or imprisonment. Yet through these painful detours, God positioned him to preserve his family and sustain a future nation during famine. What others intended for harm, God used for good. Joseph's disrupted plans became the specific pathway to God's saving purpose. These stories reveal a profound truth. People often plan for safety, success, comfort, or control, but God shapes lives for redemption, growth, and eternal impact. When our plans change, it may not signal the end of our path. It may mark the beginning of God's purpose, something greater than we imagined. Recognizing our limits begins with humility. We do not possess all the facts, and we are not in ultimate control. When plans fail, God's purpose remains steady. Therefore, we must trust Him. We can remain open to His guidance when life shifts direction, seeking His wisdom through prayer and discernment. If our purpose is to bring glory to Him, we cannot truly go wrong, even when circumstances change. Holding our plans with humility does not mean abandoning responsibility. Rather, it means planning wisely while remaining surrendered. We make thoughtful decisions. We invite God into our decision-making through prayer. We resist rigid attachment to outcomes. Isaiah 26 verse 3 assures us, "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you." Peace comes not from predictable outcomes, but from trusting the one who holds the future. In uncertainty, we choose peace, remembering that God's purpose is not fragile. There is a quiet freedom in living this way. When we release the illusion of control, anxiety loosens its grip. We become less driven by fear of failure and more attentive to God's leading. Instead of measuring success solely by whether our plans succeed, we begin measuring faithfulness by whether we follow God's direction. Many people spend their lives trying to build a name, a reputation, or a personal kingdom. Yet, we are called to something far more meaningful, to be part of God's program rather than our own. Our plans may fail, but God's purpose cannot be thwarted. When we surrender ego and pride, we become willing participants in His unfolding work. Perhaps you're facing a season where your plans have unraveled. It is easy to interpret these moments as setbacks or losses, but Scripture views them as God's time, God's leading, God's very presence. As you move forward, plan diligently, set goals, work responsibly, but plan prayerfully, holding your plans loosely. And when circumstances change, trust God to shape you and things around you for His own glory. For His purpose always stands firm. In the end, peace does not come from knowing exactly where life will lead. Peace comes from knowing the one who leads. Let us recognize our limits even while planning. Trust God with the outcome and find joy in being part of His unfailing purpose. God bless.